So we can't rule out a truce between Presidents Xi and Trump to buy more time in their very thorny trade negotiation, but the prospects aren't looking great, and our baseline scenario is that the US follows through with heavy tariffs on the remaining amount of Chinese imports. That means that Chinese retaliation will also grow a lot more serious this quarter. China will retaliate with fines and restrictions on US companies. It could also follow through with a threat to restrict rare earth exports to the United States. The Chinese yuan is likely to depreciate past 7 to the dollar, but Beijing will draw on its reserves and intervene to defend the currency and avoid a steep devaluation. It will become abundantly clear this quarter that the Europeans will fail in providing an economic lifeline to Iran. And as US sanctions deepen, Iran has options to push back, including restarting parts of its nuclear program, threatening shipping traffic near the Strait of Hormuz, and also threatening energy infrastructure in its Gulf neighbors. These will all serve as potential triggers for a punitive military strike by the US. Meanwhile, Trump should not be holding his breath for Iran to come to the negotiating table. At most, we're likely to see a flurry of mediators working on setting up a deconfliction channel as military frictions between the two rise. The US-China battle for technological dominance will drive more fragmentation in the global tech sector. While we may see some partial and selective easing of the US's severe export restrictions against Huawei, the Chinese tech giant will remain extremely vulnerable in the near term, and the countries and the telecom partners that were relying on Huawei for their 5G rollouts now have to contend with a massive compliance risk. In the longer term, we're likely to see the rise of Chinese competitors in the chip manufacturing sector and in the rollout of Chinese software alternatives. And while the US is going after Chinese big tech, American big tech will come under fire from US regulators over antitrust, privacy, and data protection concerns. Mexico has barely averted tariffs, but it also faces a very tight timeline and an uphill battle to meet Trump's demands on border security. There are two key progress checkpoints after 45 days and then 90 days when Mexico is likely to come up short in delivering results on curbing migrant flows. That's when the tariff threats could resurface. And even as Trump faces a load of economic and potential constraints when it comes to upending North American trade, just keeping that tariff threat alive will continue to sap investor confidence. Layered on top of rising trade frictions with China, this is another big geopolitical risk factor that makes a Fed cut this quarter very likely. On the Brexit front, the UK will get a new hardline prime minister who will inevitably hit a wall in London's negotiations with the EU and could even face a no-confidence vote from Parliament leading to early elections later in the year. A no-deal Brexit will be avoided this quarter, but the drama will continue. Meanwhile, Italy and Brussels will reach a compromise to avoid punitive measures on Rome, but Italy will still rebel against the EU Commission in pushing big spending policies. We're not expecting any progress on the EU-US trade front. The EU is sticking to its red line on excluding agriculture from talks, and the European Trade Commissioner won't even be appointed until likely October, just a month before Trump's deadline for the EU to come back with a deal on restricting auto sales to the US if it wants to avoid tariffs. Overall, there's still a lot of euro area risk that will continue to weigh on global economic growth on top of rising trade frictions.